It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. The smartest guy in the room is joining us one more time again. Mr. Michael Becker, how are you?
I'm getting all ready for the upcoming Old Capital Conference, Paul. Just preparing my questions day and night for the upcoming listing brokers panel.
Tell me a little bit. I mean, I'm going to be slanted on that because I love it. But tell me, as a participant in it and as somebody that has attended all of the conferences in the past, why do you like it and why should somebody come?
Well, it's first and foremost is September 22nd and 23rd. So the 22nd is the happy hour, kind of networking happy hour, and 23rd is the actual conference on the field of Globe Life Field where the Texas Rangers play. So it's going to be pretty cool, unique environment. So that's one thing. You know, I spoke at another conference 2 days ago, I guess, as we record this. And it was in some hotel ballroom, Paul, at some generic hotel with a bunch of vendors that go to every single one of these types of events with tables outside the conference room and looking like vultures trying to come attack me and sell me whatever, tax service or smart lock system or whatever they're pushing over there. So this is, it feels different. It's a little bit more fun. And there's, people that are individuals actually doing deals. Where the other conference I went to was just a lot of people that I think work for other companies, kind of larger, more institutional type players, like their employees. So these are, the people that tend to go to the Old Capital Conference are, people that are actual investors into these deals that are, either sponsors or passives trying to learn what's going on in the marketplace. And, I noticed the only brokers that were in this conference that I went to were the one broker that was monitoring the panel that I was on, where, we go to the Old Capital Conference, there'll be, dozens of brokers that actually sell multifamily real estate. So that, if you want to get networked with people that actually are doing the deal and people can help you find deals, this is head and shoulders of kind of your generic dimly lit conference room and generic Hotel USA, like all these other ones that you tend to go to.
Could not have said it any better than that. And Michael is correct. It is on September 22nd, 23rd. It's coming up here shortly at the oldcapitalconference.com, oldcapitalconference.com. Get your ticket and come to Arlington, Texas, be on the ball field where the Texas Rangers play, and have a chance to meet Michael Becker and some of the crew at Old Capital. And maybe you can get your picture taken with the main man himself, Mr. Michael Becker.
If you want to, it's funny too. Like I was just thinking when you were saying that, I'll stick around, virtually the entire day at your conference. But as soon as I got off that, I showed up maybe 20 minutes before I was supposed to go on stage and couldn't wait to get the hell out of there. As some, insurance broker was trying to come pitch me to go grab a cup of coffee with them. I was like, oh sure, and just trying to bail out of that conference I was at a couple of days ago. So
tell me, going to conferences are hugely important. Tell me how maybe one conference can kind of change your life. Change what your direction. Tell me, is there any experiences that you've had, Michael, that you went to a conference that you picked up a client or you picked up a vendor? Tell me a little bit about what you found out.
Yeah, both, right? I mean, you can meet a lot of people to do business with. I mean, that's kind of, you're getting in the room around, brokers, and you get to establish some level of relationships. And, it's like a compound business. I mean, it's like the more you do it, the longer you've done, like something that you buy today could be directly tied back to some random encounter you had years ago, right? Like, we recently got a deal because, which we talk a little bit about later, but, just meeting someone at a conference and passing, and then, years later, you're up trying to buy a deal that they're selling. I mean, that can come your direction just because some tiny little 10-minute encounter you had with somebody that they kind of liked you a little bit better than they liked this other person they don't know. So the little things like that can work. I mean, they'll think of like the conference I mentioned I spoke at a couple of days ago, never ever made any money. I could directly tie back on speaking at those types of conferences on panels. And I do that on a pretty regular basis. But, a few years ago, I spoke at one and some guy called me off of it. And turned out he owned a large portfolio. He was selling and I needed a 1031 and wanted to get out of his state, come to Texas. So we ended up doing a deal where he gave us like $15 million. And then we just did a second transaction with him that gave us over $30 million of equity to go buy a deal. And I just spoke at some conference and he reached out to me, and he never would have known who I was if I didn't take the time to go to that conference and, meet him. So, it doesn't, you could go do a lot of these conferences and never make any money. And then the one time you do make money, it could be a whole lot of money. So, you just never know. So I think that's the whole point of my saying is no one ever comes to my house or my office to give me anything. I got to go out and get it. So going to conferences like the Old Capital Conference, I think is a great way to put yourself in a position to have good things happen for you.
Can you just pull out a little bit of that discussion that you had and the person that you met? I mean, gave you $15 million after meeting you at a conference. I mean, why wasn't he trying to do it himself? Why was he needing your help? Where did that money come from? Can you just give me just broad strokes of what that was all about?
Sure. Well, he was doing it himself. They had a massive portfolio over years, and they were in a less friendly landlord environment. And he was, 70 or early 70s, was ready to kind of retire. And he was self-managing and operating, these multifamily deals for years. And he was just kind of done. And he was just done with, rent regulations and hard to evict, and all the kind of BS stuff at some of these other states besides, like Florida and Texas. And, some of the more friendly, landlord-friendly Sunbelt states, and, kind of coming out of the Midwest, he was just kind of done with it. So he was trying to find Texas, and he was smart enough to know that he didn't know what he needed to know about our market. So he came to the conference to try to learn a little bit about the market here. So he flew into town because it was in Dallas. So he flew into Dallas to try to learn about what's going on. So he goes to our conference, and then he saw a bunch of people talk. I'm sure he reached out to a few people, and one of them was me, and then struck up a conversation, kind of explained his situation. Then I had him fly back into town, and then we spent the day together in my car, just driving around, looking at, a bunch of deals that we've owned and a bunch of deals that were on the market at the time. And then, kind of through that process, he, started gaining a little bit more confidence and trust in us. And so we did that dance for, several months. And eventually he ended up getting his deals in escrow, selling them. And then we helped him buy a nice property down in the Austin market. And we've absolutely killed it for him. And then, again, they went to go sell some more buildings into last year, and then we ended up they closed kind of the first part of this year, and we ended up buying a second property in the Austin area, and that's going to be a home run as well. So it just kind of didn't happen all at once, Paul. It's just but that was kind of the start of the relationship. Is he took the time to come into a market that he didn't know well, to learn it, met some people in the marketplace that were actively doing deals, which that happened to be me. And then over a series of many meetings and phone calls and coming in town and touring properties, that's kind of how we built the trust level that he gave us almost $15 million to go buy a deal.
Now that's the advisory business that you guys at SPI do, and now you don't have the trademark on that deal in other states. Is that something that some people that have been probably into multifamily, is that something that they should be thinking about of how to raise money? I mean, on this deal, you guys not only helped him find the property, and you did you're the asset manager of the property, and you guys put money into these deals. You did it as a tick, right?
Correct.
So you guys had your own money you put into these deals. What do you think about this as a possible solution for somebody, not their first rodeo, but maybe on their second or third or fourth way of doing it in different marketplaces?
Yeah, it's I think it's I don't know too many guys. I know one of our buddies has started to do this after he saw what I was doing. So I know myself and one other guy kind of have a niche to kind of market for this. But it's turned out to be a really good solution where you help people that have a problem, a 1031 problem, and then you kind of craft it together. And it's a little bit more of certain respects, it's easier, Paul, because you get, one check that's got, a deadline and a need to go buy it. So they're motivated equity. So that's great. But the other side is a little bit more complicated, and you need to make sure you get tax professionals in place, not just a CPA or your 1031 accommodator. You probably need to actually make sure there's a tax lawyer involved, because it's a complicated structure where you can't, do your promote. You can't, take a carried interest in these deals, or you have to, convert that into kind of more market-based fee compensation. So it's a lot of nuances, and got to kind of make sure you're doing it as not only, in the spirit of the law, but it's a very technical thing. So making sure you have a good quality tax professional, like a tax lawyer, to kind of help you navigate that and make sure it's documented properly and review everything. And that goes a long way. And then it's a little bit trickier on the debt side as well. So making sure that you kind of understand the structure and can communicate the structure to your lender, and your lender understands what's going on, and they're going to make you do a couple extra things that you wouldn't normally have to do, and this makes everything a little bit more complicated. But at this point, it's kind of old hat for us because we've done it so many times that kind of got a program put together and formulaic. So at this point, we're kind of looking for anyone that might have basically 10 million or up in 1031 funds. We got a pretty good niche carved out. So those are kind of where we're looking to maybe could do a few more of those. If anyone might be in that situation that happens to be listening to my voice right now, that is something that we've done over a dozen times, and have kind of the answers to the test already kind of figured out, Paul.
I love the answers to the test. That's how I got through graduate school. So let's talk a little bit about for Ask Mike Monday. Question comes in from Daryl from Philadelphia. He's asking concerning rehab business. Michael, how do you plan a renovation, and how do you add value in properties today?
Yeah, we started out, Paul. That's pretty much everything we did was workforce housing that had a value add component to it, and started in the 60s and 70s, and went to the 80s, and went to the early 2000s, and we'll still do a little bit of that. We'll buy some of the early 2000s A- product and do some renovation programs. But a lot of what we're doing now doesn't involve anything. We'll buy some pretty nice new things because that's kind of where we're seeing more value relative to some of the value adds, because all the cap rates are basically on top of each other and have been for, I guess, many years at this point. So we're not doing as much as we used to do. But yeah, the renovations is certainly part of the business, and we certainly have several properties that we do kind of a programmatic upgrade. So there's really kind of two parts to it, Paul. You got your obviously your exterior common areas, and then you got your unit upgrades. So how do you, obviously, how do you identify that? So when you're, looking at a prospective property, the broker is going to tell you it's a value add. Even if it's a brand new construction deal, they're going to try to find the one or two backyards that the developer didn't put on there or whatever, so it's just a very minor type of stuff like that, to, some disaster property that hasn't been touched in years and it's fallen in on itself. You got to cure a bunch of deferred maintenance and then do some upgrades. So then there's everything kind of in the in between, because we've been doing, there was no value add when I was kind of first starting my career, and all of a sudden, the value add became the thing, and now everything's value add. So, and I think that's pretty much the case across the country at this point as well, most major metropolitan areas.
Let's kind of walk through just a typical value add these days. And again, the conversation goes from the A+ properties and the A properties that you're buying all the way down to the C properties. And some people are just getting into the multifamily business, and maybe they're buying C properties that they want to try to make into C+ or B- properties. So maybe just some quick helpful hints. Coaching and counseling right now. So go ahead.
I think you really kind of start. I mean, the broker is going to give you a playbook on what they think they can do, and they'll kind of tell you what some of the neighboring properties are doing. Your comp, so like if it's got classic units, which are more and more rare, meaning classic is kind of apartment jargon for old, basically, or unupgraded, and then there's like upgrades and premium, so different tiers in there. So they're gonna start by telling you like, hey, we would recommend you flooring, appliances, fixtures, backsplash, maybe countertops, and then you can charge $100 or $150 or whatever the estimated rental premium is. So you're going to get that story thrown in your face by the broker to start this deal, and then it's your job to kind of verify that, hey, is that really out there? Are the comps really getting these rental rate premiums? What are the comps doing? What are the rental sets over there for their upgrades versus classic? Or if this property itself has been had some level of upgrades done to it, which is more likely the case, how many units have been done and what's the rental rate premium they're actually achieving on that asset for the upgraded units over the classic. So those are, stuff you'll need to go through the rent roll and kind of verify and identify the upgraded units over the classic units and what's the real premium, for the same floor plan. So that's one thing. And, the other thing is doing a good physical inspection. So making sure that, when you do get awarded the deal, that you walk in the property with qualified professionals and making sure you identify deferred maintenance and, different opportunities to upgrade, and through that process, helping to fine tune your initial capital budget that you kind of, when you're making your offer, you should have some basic capital budget put together that's in your sources and uses of funds. So the use of funds is, $1 million to upgrade the property or whatever your budget is. You need to go through and try to make sure that, hey, you budgeted $200,000 for carpentry and paint. Is that right? Is that too high, too low, et cetera? And making sure you have a qualified person to help you do that, so you get your sources and uses right, Paul, and you don't run short of money out of the gate. So I think that's certainly, a tip we've talked about before in the past, but it's very critical.
So back in the day, how many contractors would you have look at the property, and would you use an outside contractor, or would you use the third-party management that has a contractor group that they work with?
Sure. In Texas, we try to use Brian Amos, who you've had on the podcast many times and shot videos with. So he's with Omni Assessment. So he's my preferred vendor. So what he does is he's an engineer, Brian is, and he'll go out and he'll coordinate all the various trades you need and then put together a pretty report with the video, which is great. And so he'll walk the units, give you kind of a condition of all the units, and then he'll bring a roofer, plumber, someone look at the exterior, electrician, look at the HVAC, all the mechanicals, foundation, and et cetera. Nowadays, someone look at the elevators and the fire sprinklers and the parking structure, because we're buying more complicated buildings than what we used to buy, and then put together a pretty report and tell you what's good, what's bad, and kind of an estimated cost. So when he's not available, the backup is the property management company does something basically the exact same thing as what Brian does. They just don't have it quite as pretty formatted, and it's not quite as easy and organized as what Brian does. So they're less expensive, but you get a little lesser output, and it's a little bit, you got to kind of spend a little more time to interpret it versus what he does. So either the management company can kind of serve that function for you in most cases, or Brian or someone like Brian. There should be several services around. I found that the lenders property condition reports are pretty much worthless. So I don't, I wouldn't recommend just relying on whatever the PCA that the lender does. They just, they don't do as thorough of a job as I think you need to do when you're buying a multi-million-dollar building.
Without a question, there's third-party reports that the lender is going to require. One is a phase one that just kind of goes into the environmental impact. Are you buying a property that's on a nuclear waste dump? You have an appraisal in terms of what the valuation is, and then you have a thing called a property condition assessment report. And really, it's the eyes and ears of the lender to kind of figure out what do we have at risk for health and safety if someone were to drown in a pool or get their head stuck between the wood rails. Is there something that someone's going to fall through a floor? That's what they're looking for, but they're not projecting what your expenses are going to be for the rehab to the property itself. So let's say you have Brian take a look at it, and you want to get some of this work done after you acquire the property. How do you figure out who the vendor is, the contractor, to actually do the work on this property?
Yeah, we utilize a construction manager through Valiant, who's our property management company. So then, good thing about the report is say, hey, the building needs to be painted and there's carpentry work. So then he'll give you an estimate that we kind of help for the budgeting purposes. And that's kind of where we budget, and then we try to go beat that number. So we'll typically, get at least 3 bids on every major job that we do, Paul. So we'll just go out and get 3 bids. And so there'll be, maybe 6 to 8 vendors that are kind of in the rotation for a project like, exterior carpentry and paint. And we'll go get, 3 to 5 of them to go bid it out, and then, try to take the best price of the qualified vendors. And sometimes these vendors tick you off along the way. You can put them in the penalty box for a period of time or forever. And so you got some guys that are, more trusted. And it's funny too. You think you just use the same vendor over and over again, but depending on their workload, sometimes they're hungry and they get a little more lean on their pricing, and sometimes they have a lot of work and they're like, well, I don't have time for this, but if they're willing to pay me this high number, I'll go ahead and do it. So the bidding process is very, very important, because you do get a wide spectrum of pricing for virtually the same work, which is always fascinating to me, because you think it'd be pretty much the same, but it never is. So the bidding process is very important, and we utilize a construction manager to kind of do that process, and then once they compile it all together, they'll present it to us, and then usually there's a clear winner on who you want to go with. But that's how we do it. And if you should do something similar, whether you do that yourself or you have a construction manager in-house or with the management company do it for you.
How much money should you put down? So let's say you found the right guy to do the concrete construction work on the parking lot. how much money do you usually put down? Do you put in 10%, 50%, just to get these guys engaged? And then also, do you show these contracts to your attorneys for them to review to see if there's any attaboys or gotchas in there?
And most of these contracts are pretty straightforward, simple forms. So there's really not a whole lot that we typically have a lawyer look at it. If it's a more complex document, maybe that might make sense. But most of the larger exterior kind of type of jobs, Paul, I mean, the terms that I'm most familiar with are usually somewhere around 30, 30, 30, 10. So you're, either 30 to 50 up front. And then, so they usually be like 30% up front, 30% upon, a milestone of completion, halfway through, 30% when it's 100% done, and then you hold back 10% retainage for 20 or 30 days to make sure if there's any sort of warranty work or cleanup items that they come back and do it. Then after 30 days of completion, you pay the 10% retainage. Something similar to that schedule is pretty typical for large exterior jobs that I've been involved with.
Do you have one more second for another question, Michael?
Sure, let's do it.
So this comes from Laura, North Carolina. Michael, been watching you for a long period of time. Great information. Appreciate that. I've been the bridesmaid many, many times, and I'm about to become the bride. How are you winning these deals, Michael?
It's a variety of ways, variety of things. I mean, it's really a very unfair business, as we talked about a lot here lately. So I'm just trying to think of the deals we've done in the last year or so. I mean, a couple of these were, I think I had some level of a leg up in virtually every deal that I've done, Paul. I'm trying to think of a deal that I just hadn't had some sort of
leg up, what does that mean?
Some little friendly nudge my way in some form or fashion. So thinking in like a recent past, I mean, we had a couple of deals that we bought that were marketed, and so one of them, last two deals we bought that were marketed, one of them kind of went through the process. We thought it was a good price, and it never exceeded kind of our max price on the deal. Then we're going the best and final, and it was a broker we've done several deals with, and I was going against two other groups that he didn't have as good of a relationship or track record with, and so he got the seller to we're all basically around the same price, and he got the seller to say, okay, you should give an exclusive counter to Michael at SPI, and if he can hit this price in these terms, it's your deal. So that was one way that we got a deal. And then another way here recently, we had a deal that went marketed. I kind of bowed out. I couldn't go. I got busy with some other stuff and just couldn't quite push the price to where it needed to be. And they went with another group, and then that group kind of messed up their underwriting, ended up backing out. And then that deal kind of boomeranged back to me. So it was us versus another group that was from out of state, that didn't understand the local area as well. They hadn't owned in that market. And we had just bought a deal, less than a mile away. And the seller was based in Dallas. I'm based in Dallas. And done transaction with the broker. And so that other buyer had, basically no chance, right? So I was going to get the first shot because I knew I met at some conference a few years ago and had dinner one night with the owner. And the broker had done, 4 or 5 other transactions with, and we owned a deal right down the street. So this other group coming in from out of town, I was going to win that race 100% of the time. And that's what happened. So we got the first shot and we ended up striking on it. Another deal I can think of is it was a deal that just got signed up, was about to go to market. And then the broker, we had actually never transacted with this broker before in San Antonio, but the brokers in San Antonio usually they cover both Austin and San Antonio. So we've done a bunch of deals in Austin. I've been talking to this guy for years, and we keep talking, and a lot of the stuff we always ask is like, what's next, what's coming up. And he had this deal that was he just signed the listing agreement, about to go to market, and the seller was willing to take a preemptive offer. He learned if we could pay a certain price, so we're willing to just go ahead and forego the marketing process. And it was an attractive price to us. And so we got awarded the deal before we even went to market. So we got the first shot at it. And I knew the broker was, all the brokers tend to live in Austin. There's more of those guys are in Austin than there are in San Antonio. This guy didn't want to drive, 20 times down to San Antonio, 90 miles each way to go tour the deal in the middle of summer. So, he was motivated to strike a deal. So he kind of got it put our way. And so we got the deal before it ever hit the market. And it was a great deal. And, a few months later, the same developer sold basically the same property that we bought in a different location for, 10% higher than what we just paid for it. So, we got the deal without having to go through the process. So there's some recent deal stories, Paul, kind of how I got awarded some properties.
Have you taken these brokers not only to dinner, but out to, I don't know, to Hawaii, but have you taken these brokers out to bring their family out to Orlando? Some of these guys in the past have, the sponsors have taken the brokers out there just to wine them and dine them just to be on their radar so they get their first opportunity. Have you done that at all?
A little bit, not as much as some of our competitors that really go over the top. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's, it's a relationship business, so little stuff like that. So yeah, dinners and going on. A lot of times they do a lot of events where you go, fishing or hunting or golfing or, some sort of activity like that. So I've done numerous events like that, Paul, over the years. Those are good opportunities, as we talked about in the past, to get some quality time in a non-work environment to kind of bond, and those little things like that then help. But I mean, really at the end of the day, if you have a successful track record, it kind of gets a lot easier. And the more you do, the easier it gets being awarded some of these opportunities over, some of that group from New Jersey that was trying to break into the marketplace. They just had, no shot against me just because of the compound effect of all the things I've done for, many, many years and all the various events I've gone to. So I think things like that are a great idea, going out and, doing these dinners and going to the events. So they're, very, very critical, and it might not pay immediate dividends, but if you're in this business for the long term, usually that stuff kind of boomerangs back and helps you, years down the road.
Coaching and counseling session right now, Michael. You buy a property from a broker A, and you've had it for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden you sell it, and you don't use broker A, you use broker B, C, or D. Again, this business is about relationships, about getting more business in the door. I was listening to you the other day. We happened to be in the car, and you were talking to that broker A that had sold you that building. And one thing that you mentioned I thought was great, that there's 1,000% chance that you're going to sell this property that I bought from you 3 years ago. Give people that maybe not know what the protocol is in multifamily, just some coaching and counseling lessons on what they should be expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of just the unwritten rule that if you buy a deal from a competent broker, that you should list it back with them, or you'll have, some problems doing future business with them. So very few exceptions. That's pretty much the rule that we've lived by. Recently, I did sell a deal that I bought through another broker. Through a different brokers, we had an off-market offer, but I made sure I paid the first broker, and then another deal that I bought kind of direct from a seller, we ended up listing a separate property with that broker that sold us the property A. We listed property B with them as kind of like a makeup, Paul. So we made sure that we had the conversation. And before I did anything, I took them to lunch, explained what was going on, explained my plan, and made sure that we were all on the same page and didn't have any sort of animosity. Because if you want to do a lot of business, the quickest way to make sure your failures start to piss off the brokerage community, and then all these little things that could go your way could also go against you in pretty short order as well. So making sure that you do what you say you're going to do, and you kind of pay them back is the way the world goes around. And most of the other brokers know if you bought a deal from broker A, maybe you get them to give you an opinion of value, but chances are if they didn't sell you the deal, they understand when they don't win the deal to list it. That's just kind of the way of the world. Now, obviously, if that broker did something to upset you dramatically and never want to do business with them, that's a whole nother story. But if they're competent and do a good job and are active in the marketplace, that's kind of the custom to pay it back.
Horse trading in multifamily wins you a lot of future business. So great information from Michael Becker. Michael, if somebody wanted to learn a little bit more about what SPI does, give them a little bit of a commercial.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we actually updated our website. So if you go to our website, you can actually figure out what we do nowadays, because before you probably couldn't, because it was a pretty terrible website. So our website, simply www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI like spy advisory.com. Bunch of information, our portfolio, both present and past is on there. So you get a pretty good sense about what we do. There's also a form to fill out if you want to get more information sent to you and get into the database and get on our list for future investment opportunities. Certainly hoping to get another one done here in 2021 and hopefully have a pretty good year in 2022. So there'll hopefully be many opportunities to put out there in the not too distant future. So simply www.spiadvisor.com. And then I would kind of put plug for Paul's conference, Old Capital Conference. It's coming up here very, very soon. So go to kind of last call for that. Just go oldcapitalconference.com. Is that right, Paul?
Absolutely.
So September 22nd and 23rd. Be there or be square, right?
There you go. I like that 1950s phrase from Laverne and Shirley. That's great. All right, that was Michael Becker, the great Michael Becker. We certainly do appreciate you spending some time with us. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. That was Michael Becker. Have a great day.